Trillions of dollars have been wiped off the markets in the past 24 hours as one anonymous, mysterious trader made over $1 billion with a perfectly timed short that was executed 1 minute before Donald Trump slapped 100% tariffs on China. So what happened yesterday, this bloodbath? Was this just one manipulated price move from a trader who maybe had more information than most of us? Or if we zoom out a little bit, is this the beginning of yet another dramatic October crash? Because most people forget that some of the largest stock market crashes in history have begun in October. We can see here the 1929 stock market crash begun in October. That was again a 90% crash that began the Great Depression. We also have the Black Monday crash, which began on October 19th. This began on, well, you guessed it, October. And then in 2008, the global financial crisis. This was an enormous 50% crash in the markets. And when did this begin? Of course, October 2008, and we even have the massive stock market panic of 1907. This also began in October. What I find a little bit interesting is BlackRock was making some pretty interesting moves that I want to cover in a moment. But I first want to have a look at what is happening with the stock market. Before we look at what was one of the largest liquidation events in history, what is happening in the stock market? Is this the beginning of the hailed crash that so many people are talking about? You can probably see your favorite trading account on Twitter posting all of these comparison charts, saying the stock market crash just begun. Now, what's interesting, I believe, is we've seen this play out before. We've seen this story. Trump just announced 100% tariffs on China. This is what caused the dramatic collapse in markets yesterday. But we've kind of seen this play out just earlier in the year. Let's not forget there was a little bit of a kerfuffle in the markets in April when Trump wiped $9 trillion off the market because of, guess what? Tariffs. Again, this is the chart that I started today's video on. Now, when you zoom in on this chart, it looks scary, doesn't it? I mean, look at that red candle. That is just, by the way, that's an enormous move in the equity markets. If I were to zoom in here, the S&P 500 crashed from 673 to 651. That's a 3% move. The S&P 500, the last time I checked, was over $50 trillion. So that would represent nearly $2 trillion wiped off the S&P 500 in. But have a look at where I've zoomed out to. This here, where this big red vertical line is, this is April 2025, earlier in the year. The equity markets had, let's measure it, this was about a 23% correction. And why did this happen when it did in April 2025? This was, once again, because of tariffs. More tariff scares. But the liquidation event we saw yesterday, I do want to put it into context, because a lot of people are saying this is the beginning of the end. This is the beginning of a 1929, 90% stock market crash, and we're headed for a Great Depression. I'm not sure whether we're going to see that. I really don't believe we're going to see a 90% crash. But these type of liquidation events, typically, these don't mark the tops or the market rolling over. This, I believe, has a lot of similarities to 2020. Again, let's have a look at the crash that happened in early 2020. Look at this purple line. This is actually a chart of Bitcoin. At the time, it was really struggling to get above $10,000. We tapped that purple line on 3 or 4 occasions, and we saw that massive liquidation event. And after that, Bitcoin rocketed. All stocks went to the moon. Bitcoin rallied from 3,800 to 65,000 in a matter of, 6 months? It was a hell of a crash. Again, you guys know I'm not a technical analysis YouTube channel. It's not what we're about, but we're trying to tell a broader story here because we can see a little similarity. Have a look at that purple line on the right-hand side of this chart. This is Bitcoin. We had 3 attempts to get over 123. We had this massive wipeout and liquidation, which, to just put things into perspective, destroyed so much capital. You guys are not going to believe it, how much capital was liquidated yesterday. Let's again, before we turn back to the equity markets, let's look at the damage it caused in the quote unquote crypto market. We can see that the 2020 crash saw $1.2 billion in liquidations. Again, let's not forget, Bitcoin crashed 60% in one day. People thought the world was ending. People thought the stock markets weren't going to open for a year. But look at how little capital was liquidated in that event. 1.2 billion. The FTX crash in 2022, which again, I'll remind you, marked a bottom, saw $1.6 billion in liquidations. Yesterday, we saw $19 billion in liquidations. This was nearly 20 times bigger than the wipeout we saw in March 2020 when Bitcoin shared, 60% overnight? And again, I'll remind you, after that liquidation, this is the chart of Bitcoin right now. We're sitting at, last time I checked, $110,000 per coin. So to put things into perspective, comparatively, we're doing pretty well. Comparatively, Bitcoin's down about 12% from its all-time highs. It would potentially suggest, I don't think this is speculation. I think this is just fact. Bitcoin held up so much better than most of the other markets. Obviously, the S&P 500 only went down 3%. It's a much bigger market. Let's recognize that. But what's, again, interesting to be aware of, some of these altcoins literally went to zero yesterday. We're talking about multi-billion, multi-hundred billion dollar altcoins look like this. This, for example, is an altcoin. It's called Sui. It went from $3.60 to 55 cents in an hour. No, that's not a mistake. That is literally an 85% correction in an hour. And there were so many tweets on Twitter right now of people blowing up their entire trading accounts. So many people went bankrupt yesterday. Again, it's horrible when people lose money. I want to be very clear here. There's a lot of sad stories that came out yesterday. There's a lot of people who lost a lot of money. Again, we always tell you, please be very, very careful if you're trading. On a little bit of a brighter note, it looks as if somebody nailed this crash. Jim Cramer, the meme, inverse Cramer strikes again. He tweeted, buy crypto, when it was about 125,000. And, well, all I'm going to say is the meme has once again held true. It is... It's an interesting correlation between what Jim Cramer tweets and what the markets do. But what I find even more interesting is there was $19 billion wiped off the stock market. Wiped out in liquidations. But look at who bought. BlackRock bought $5 billion of Bitcoin at an average price of $105,000. Don't forget, the price of Bitcoin was at $105,000 for a matter of minutes. Literally minutes. Somehow Larry Fink was able to accumulate 45,000 Bitcoin in a matter of minutes. Again, if this tweet is accurate, that's a $5 billion buy. Think about that. That's 45,000 coins. We know that only 450 Bitcoin is mined every day. This is 100 days worth of supply. Don't you just think that's a little bit interesting? I've got a little bit of a conspiracy theory with BlackRock involved that I want to get to in a moment, because there's a lot of red flags, and let's just call it what it is. Interesting coincidences in the markets that I want to cover. But before I get there, I just want to also have a look at another little bit of a dislocation we're seeing in the markets, because I found this tweet. I found it fascinating. Gold crossed $4,000 earlier in the week, and it is very, very rare that when gold doubles this aggressively and this quickly, that there's not a serious issue in financial markets. We can see the last times that gold rallied as quickly as it did was in Rome in 235 to 284 AD. This preceded the collapse of the Roman Empire. Gold doubled again in the 1600s as the Spanish Empire collapsed. We saw something similar in 1789 during the French Revolution, the aftermaths of the French Revolution. We also saw this in 1921 during the German hyperinflation. Gold had an insane rally, a big spike. We saw the same thing in 1971 when the gold window was closed by Richard Nixon. Gold soared by 2,400%. And then we saw a ruble collapse and a gold rally in 1991 as the Soviet Union went through a little bit of turmoil. And now we're seeing the same thing again. I'll remind you, I think watching what gold is doing is incredibly important. Again, gold is, what does Luke Groman call it? It was one of the last functioning fire alarms that was telling us there's a problem with the financial system. Now, again, just appreciate and recognize the chart of gold right now because it is going absolutely parabolic. If I put this on the monthly, you'll see what I mean. It's a very interesting look at that. I mean, that just screams hyperinflation. I know a lot of people say, oh, we'll never see hyperinflation, but that chart right there screams we're seeing a currency crisis. So we got gold showing some really interesting signs. We have tariffs returning to the markets, and we have Jim Cramer tweeting crazy things, and we have altcoins going to zero. I'm more interested in what comes next. Are we going to see another one of these enormous stock market crashes in October? Again, I'm not a trader. I'm not someone who's going to make a call either way because nobody knows what's going to happen. Nobody has a clue where the markets are going to go in the short term. Absolutely nobody. Except for the trader who made a very coincidentally timed trade 1 minute before Trump announced his tariffs yesterday. I want to dive into that in a moment because that is, let me just call it what it is. It's suspicious. That's what it is. It's incredibly suspicious. But I think I want to read this tweet first. This tweet's an interesting one because it helps to explain what happened. A single colossal Bitcoin whale shorted at the exact peak, then just minutes before the market-shattering crash piled on millions more in shorts. So this is the story right now. A whale, the last time I checked, it was like 1 minute before Trump announced the 100% tariffs. Have a look at this. This is a tweet right here. CoffeeZilla tweeted this out. He's made a name for himself for following fraud. I watched his video that he released today, just a couple of hours ago, and it was, let's just say, insightful. So we can see a whale placed a short exactly 1 minute before Trump threatened tariffs against China. This is his wallet. The last short was placed at 8:49 GMT. Trump tweeted at 8:50 GMT. Oh, isn't that just incredible luck? How about that? Now, it's worth noting this whale made nearly $1 billion when we add up just how much money they made in, an hour. It's kind of insane when you start thinking about it. It's hilarious reading some of these comments. The whale in question, was it somebody inside the Oval Office? There's some great memes. Orange Wizard of tariffs immediately halves your portfolio. I want to... Isn't that interesting? I want to talk a little bit more about the coincidences in a moment. First, I want to talk a little bit more about, are we witnessing a top? I've been seeing a lot of people say we've topped, the markets are all over, crash is incoming. What I will say is that I watch, this is called a Bitcoin bull market peak indicator. This tracks 30 different indicators to see whether we've hit a top. Not one of them has hit. You got 30 indicators here. You've got the Pi cycle top indicator, the Bitcoin rainbow chart. You guys know what I think of charts, but I'm going to show you all the data, even if I disagree with it. The 22-day RSI, Bitcoin dominance, Bitcoin reserve risk, Bitcoin's 4-year moving average, crypto Bitcoin bull run index. There's a ton of different, here we go, the golden ratio multiplier. You got a ton of metrics here that have got a really good track record for predicting the tops in Bitcoin. Not one of them have hit. I will say that. I think that's kind of interesting. There's a lot of people really bearish right now, and typically you don't see that amount of bearishness at the exact top of a market. Typically, we don't crash 80% after you see $18 billion of liquidations from leveraged traders. Again, I'm not making a directional call here because I don't know. I have no idea. But I want to at least show you both sides of the story. Or because all I'm seeing right now on the timeline is bearishness. I'm seeing a lot of people saying it's all over. A lot of people predicting the top. Here's another one of these top predictions. We can see here, based on previous cycles, a lot of people are saying October 2025 was the absolute top for Bitcoin. And by the way, there was actually an anonymous prediction made 3 years ago. We kind of jokingly showed you this tweet earlier in the week. 2 years ago, someone said that Bitcoin would top on October 6th, 2025. Literally the day before it hit that new all-time high at $126,000. Coincidence? Coincidence or prophecy? Look, I personally think it was a coincidence. I don't think we've topped, but I think that's a pretty fascinating tweet. Not going to lie about it. It's a very interesting tweet. Everybody's been talking about this week. And from a timing analysis, it would make sense that Bitcoin tops in Q4 2025, but it just doesn't quite add up. That's what I will say. None of this adds up. For me, you very, very rarely see these types of liquidations at the tops of a market. Like we've showed you, typically it's more likely the bottom. Here's another image that kind of explains what we're talking about here. That is kind of unreal. I will say that. It's very, very interesting. What I think is the signal, though, is this. We just saw a 20x FTX level liquidation event, and they couldn't push Bitcoin under $100,000. That, to me, I think highlights, I would say a smoking gun, because I do think it's interesting that BlackRock just saw one of its biggest buys in history. I want to get onto BlackRock here in a moment, but you know how I mentioned that altcoin that lost 86% of its value yesterday? Guess who was all in on it? You won't believe me. Some of you will believe me. Raoul Pal. Who remembers him? Wasn't Raoul Pal the crypto guru telling us to go all in NFTs last cycle? He was saying that Luna was basically risk-free. Well, let's not forget, nearly his entire liquid portfolio was in Sui. Oh, it will outperform over time. Come on, guys. Be incredibly careful who you listen to. Did BlackRock just buy $100 million of SUI yesterday? I don't think so. But they did buy $5 billion worth of Bitcoin. Let's get into this because, again, it's a big number. Let's put it into perspective. Is that a normal buy? Is it normal for BlackRock to execute a $5 billion buy while it was crashing? Let's put things into perspective. I'm trying to find the chart I want to show you. We know on October 8, just before the crash, they bought 3,000 Bitcoin. BlackRock did recently get to the 800,000 Bitcoin milestone. That is, by the way, nearly 4% of the Bitcoin supply. And this is going to get into the theory that we're about to explore in a moment. We do have an interesting theory to explore about BlackRock. We can see the green spike we saw recently was pretty big. The inflows into BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF were big. And again, while the price has been trending sideways, look at the uptick from ETFs. Smart money right now is buying. That's clear. There's no hesitation. Everybody can see that super clearly. But I mean, the more interesting question arises when we start talking about, okay, what's happening here? Was the crash orchestrated? Is there something fishy going on? I've seen a lot of people talk about this, so I want to break down. It's not a tweet thread, but it's a little bit of a longer explanation for you guys. This is Jack Cruz. We can see he's quote tweeting someone's tweet who's saying, wow, don't you think that's strange? A whale shorted at the exact peak just minutes before the Trump tweet. And you can see we're tracking the whale here. He literally sold a minute before the crash. And then all the green shows that they closed their short pretty much exactly at the bottom. It's not every day that somebody makes multiple hundreds of millions of dollars. Jack Cruz on Twitter said that my bet is it was Howard Lutnick and Larry Fink created the short to see if they controlled enough Bitcoins to make the market move as it did. It was a compliance test by the government to benefit itself. Why? Well, that's the question. Why? Again, that was the largest Bitcoin flash crash in history. $278 billion in value wiped out in 45 minutes. That is a crash the government can easily track via the blockchain and apprehend someone. Yes, correct. Why isn't somebody in handcuffs for market manipulation? Well, Jack says the reason no one will be caught is because the criminals are in DC. They're the ones doing the crime. Just thought it was an interesting tweet I'd read out, considering the size of the crash. And again, I'm just saying it's coincidental that Larry Fink just bought 45,000 Bitcoin. BlackRock accumulated $5 billion worth during the flash crash. Do you guys think that is a coincidence? Just another one of those events that really makes you question things, isn't it? But it's not the only one. I want to go down a little bit more of a rabbit hole because, of course, let's not forget what else has happened this week. We've seen all of the digital ID stuff come out. Distractions? I'm not so sure. The only thing I've said with certainty is that the big money will try to shake you out of your position. They will try to shake you out of your Bitcoin. This is where I want to get into the, let's call it, more somber side of today's video, because I'm sure you guys have seen a lot of the tweets. A lot of seasoned traders with a ton of money got absolutely wiped yesterday. We're not talking about people losing 20K on a leverage long, or we're not talking about somebody losing even, $200, $300, $400,000. We're talking about people losing millions and tens of millions of dollars. Like, these are serious traders, people with 8 figures of fiat on an exchange. A lot of them getting all wiped out. Again, there is another culprit here. This is, for example, just one of the screenshots from an exchange. These are the different traders on an exchange. Look at the top losses. Minus 59 million, minus 35 million, minus 21 million. These are enormous losses, huge. People got absolutely rinsed. And again, I'll remind you, wealth is never destroyed. It transfers hands. So a lot of seasoned traders, they got wiped out yesterday. But let's not forget, that Bitcoin has moved hands. It's gone somewhere. This is just yet another example of what I saw on Twitter. I lost all my money in Sui. $15 million lost. The industry's a scam. And we can see I saw another one of this dude's tweets. He went from $15 million to $4,000. They will try to shake you out of your position. I don't know whether exchanges are going to collapse tomorrow, but for me, if they did, I'm personally prepared for that situation to happen and it wouldn't phase me. That's what Mickey says in the chat. I agree, take your money out now. Again, it's I don't want it to be one of those days where it's a I told you so day. It's not about that. But again, we've been screaming from the rooftops here on this channel that unless you got your money in your own self-custody, you're playing a lot of risk. You're really engaging in risky business. I tweeted this out today. I said we've made 1,300 videos on this channel over the past 5 years and literally said the exact same thing in every video. Do not trade your Bitcoin. Do not leverage trade your Bitcoin. Do not trust exchanges with your Bitcoin. I get it. People want to make money. People think they can outperform Bitcoin. I understand it. But there should be no world where somebody loses 15 million because that's their entire net worth all on one exchange. Okay? I've told you from day one, if you don't have 90%, I prefer 100% of your money off an exchange where it can't be taken in a hardware wallet. I seriously don't think you own anything. I think you got paper wealth. I think the liquidation event we saw yesterday was proof that unless your Bitcoin is in one of these, you don't own it. A lot of these exchanges got absolutely wiped. Again, just go and buy a hardware wallet. It does not matter what hardware wallet you guys want to buy. Just go get one. Okay, I've personally got the one I've got in my hand right now is the Trezor Model 5. There's a little touchscreen hardware wallet. Look at how compact and small that is. You can tell I've been using it. Look at those fingerprints and scratches all over the screen. I use my hardware wallets. I like to play around with them. Go and grab one. Trezor's going to give you 5% off if you buy one and if you use a promo code Luke. And another hardware wallet that I think is super easy to use. It's beginner friendly. Again, that's what matters here. Beginner friendly. It's a Ledger. Ledger has a cool little touchscreen hardware wallet. You can get a Ledger Stacks, a Ledger Flex. Ledger's going to give you $10 of free Bitcoin if you use the link down below in the description. Again, you don't have wealth if it's sat on an exchange. The big money is coming for it. And I honestly just think this is going to be the first of many liquidation events. I'm going to show you a chart looking at all of the liquidation events in history in a moment, and you're going to see some really interesting coincidences of what the markets typically do after these liquidation events. But while we're talking about people taking your money, again, I think I showed you this guys maybe a week ago. And I said, be very, very careful. A lot of people, especially public Bitcoiners like myself, you're walking around with a target on your back. Okay. Just be careful. Just be cognizant. A lot of people use multi-sig. Sadly, multi-signature wallet did not protect the family that got kidnapped recently in America. You guys can see the headline: Texas brothers. They were federally charged recently for taking a family hostage. Again, it's horrific, but they stole $8 million of crypto. And what's really fascinating is they locked up this family for 8 hours. You can see they walked in with AR-15 style rifles and a shotgun. And they found out that the gentleman who lived there, he must have owned Bitcoin in a different wallet somewhere else. So they actually put the guy in a car. They drove him 3 hours so he would go and unlock his entire Bitcoin wallet. So again, I have multi-signature wallets. I have keys in different countries. So if somebody wants to do that to me, they're going to have to put me on a plane. And I don't keep any Bitcoin on me personally where I travel. Again, I have a public YouTube channel talking about Bitcoin. I would be an idiot to have any Bitcoin on me. You might get $100 off me if you come and do the same to me, and it could be a 3-hour joyride. But again, I think a simple solution to this is something called time-locked Bitcoin wallets. Multi-signature wallets are cool because you can have 3 hardware wallets, one in 3 different states or 3 different towns. To move Bitcoin out of a wallet, you have to sign a transaction from 2 out of these 3 keys. That protects you in a lot of situations, but not this one that recently went down in America. This is why I like time locking hardware wallets. Again, I'd love for you guys to learn more about time locking, but I could set up a hardware wallet or a Bitcoin wallet, and I can program when I allow money to move out of it. It could be 1 week, could be a month, could be a year, could be 10 years. Maybe I want to pass on my Bitcoin to my kids. Maybe it's 18 years. If you graduate high school, Bitcoin can be unlocked from this wallet. I think time locking is not only really cool from an inheritance planning, but also from a security standpoint. The problem with time locking, well, it's above my head, which is why, again, I wanted to just let you know about a great Bitcoin company who creates a solution to this. This is Bitvault. They have a really easy to use Bitcoin application that lets you set up a time-locked Bitcoin wallet in minutes. I've set it up. I've used it. I think they're an incredible company. I highly recommend you pay very close attention to what they're doing. Right now, they are under a pre-sale, and they're offering a $199 lifetime deal. That means you can access the app forever for $199. I know originally I told you there was 42 spots available worldwide. I know for certain there's now less than 8. Again, after the lifetime pre-sale forever subscriptions are done, you're going to have to buy a monthly subscription. I still think it's worth every dollar if you buy a monthly subscription in 3 months' time. But of course, I think you're going to get a better price if you buy a lifetime deal. So I highly recommend you check out Bitvault at the link down below, because again, this protects you from horrific events like this. Doesn't just give you more security and better sleep at night, but it protects you. I think it's really cool as well from an inheritance standpoint. So let's talk a little bit more about where we are in the market. We're at the stage where I think the big money is coming and they're going to want to take your Bitcoin. Again, when we zoom out, I'll remind you guys, where's the crash? I don't see any crash here on the Bitcoin chart. Sure, that monthly candle isn't the prettiest, not going to lie. But I don't think there's any big horrific crash. I think we're in October. There's some really interesting data around October. Yes, some of the biggest crashes in history happen in October. That's true. But when you don't see an enormous stock market crash, October is generally it's Bitcoin's second best month of the year. So I'll just remind you of that. Doesn't necessarily mean it's all over, just because we've started on a little bit of a shaky ground here. We could come back. Absolutely, we could come back. So the whales are still net short and bearish. Pest makes a really good point here in the comment section. $20 billion liquidated, but Bitcoin's only down 13% from the top. 30 to 35% corrections happen a lot. Be prepared. This is a bull run. This is a bull run. It is very common to see that type of correction. Shout out Mike Hobart. Longtime friend of the channel. I haven't spoken to Mike in years, but he's a great Bitcoiner. Go and follow him. You should follow him. And we do need to talk a lot more about physical security threats. We do talk about it a lot on this channel. We're not just hopium dealers over here. Again, I say this all the time. There's no point being bullish or watching all of these retire on Bitcoin videos if you've got money on a centralized exchange. Because I can guarantee you won't be able to retire with 0.1 Bitcoin or 100 Bitcoin if you've got it on an exchange. That's a promise. Again, not financial advice. Nothing we say on this channel is financial advice. But it's a risk. I wouldn't be watching any retire on Bitcoin videos until you got your Bitcoin in a hardware wallet. So go and take care of that ASAP. Any hardware wallet. Just go and get one, please. Get a seed signer. Build your own for $20. It's a little bit over my head, but there's solutions for everyone. Doesn't matter if you've got $100 of Bitcoin in Africa. Go get a hardware wallet. $20 hardware wallet. Build your own. I'm trying to read all the comments. Apologies, guys. I want to read all the comments. Before I move on to the next chart I want to show you. Again, I'll just remind you of how insane the mainstream media is. Forbes, cascade price warning, puts Bitcoin on the brink ahead of imminent BlackRock $100 billion turning point. Oh boy. If you read that headline, you might fall off your chair until you go and look at the Bitcoin price. We're down 12%. Sure. Wow. Imagine reading that headline. You haven't paid attention to Bitcoin in 3 years. You read that and you think, oh, shoot. How's my retirement? You pull up the chart. What? What are you talking about, Forbes? You've lost your mind. Again, I don't care what any shitcoins are doing. I have no idea what shitcoins are doing, except going to zero. But I do know, I'm pretty sure Bitcoin's still positive in October. Let's have a look. Oh boy, it's been a volatile October. All right, we're negative. I lied. We started at 114,000. We're at 109. But the month is not over. October is still young, my friends. October is still young. And honestly, I'll conclude this video by saying, who knows what's going to happen? Maybe Bitcoin crashes further. I don't know. But I think the crash has taught us centralized exchanges are a massive hole. Seeing how illiquid they are and how much wealth was wiped off them, I will say, be very careful if you trust in a centralized exchange. And then a lot of people will say, but Luke, how do I buy my Bitcoin? I think there's a lot of solutions. There's a lot of ways that you can get your hands on Bitcoin. For example, you can mine your own Bitcoin. I think a great place to mine your own Bitcoin is Blockware. They have hosted mining solutions, or you can buy the mining rigs yourself directly from them. I think if you're in America, you absolutely have to look into mining your Bitcoin, because recently that big, beautiful bill that was passed allows you to actually invest into Bitcoin mining and get a 100% tax write-off. Again, as I tell you, nothing you hear here is financial advice. I'm not your tax advisor, but look into it. Again, if you can get a tax write-off for buying Bitcoin miners and you can accumulate Bitcoin with the miners without touching an exchange, that feels like a no-brainer to me. So again, if you do want to learn more about that, book a call with the guys at Blockware. There's a link down below for you guys to check them out. Again, learning to mine your own Bitcoin, it is an essential tool in your Bitcoin toolkit. I will say that. Uncle Confiscation. I do love that name. That's interesting. It feels like a confiscation. That again, I don't know what happened yesterday. Maybe BlackRock just perfectly timed the bottom. Again, I'm not saying coincidences can't happen. I am saying that I think it's strange that $20 billion of wealth gets wiped out of the market and BlackRock has one of its biggest accumulation days in a while. That's kind of my summary here on this video. A lot of people are saying this is the beginning of the end. We're going to see an enormous stock market crash because a lot of these stock market crashes have begun in October. Again, the first month of Q4. Are we going to see it again? I don't know. We could. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't have a trading course where I'm going to draw some funny lines on a chart and tell you to pay me $10,000 for a trading course because I don't know. I have no idea, and nobody does, to be honest. Nobody has a clue. Look at all of the trading gurus on Twitter who just got wiped out yesterday. They have no idea. I'm just showing you all of the data. I'm going to show you both sides of the story. You guys can honestly make up your own conclusion. I personally think what happened yesterday was healthy. I think a lot of liquidity got wiped out. A lot of leverage got wiped out. It's not just an opinion. That's a fact. $20 billion of shorts wiped. It's nearly 20 times more than 2020. Look, I'd be surprised if we see the same thing tomorrow. That's all I'm going to say on the matter. Oh, some of these comments are hilarious. $10,000 for a pair of crystal balls. Yeah, I'm missing out on a ton of money. Not scamming people to buy a trading course. Again, every single partner of this YouTube channel, they're a partner I not only use, but I believe in. And again, I've told you the same thing for 5 years, guys. Buy Bitcoin, put it into self-storage, learn how to back up your Bitcoin correctly. Again, titanium plates from Stampseed, listen to it. It's real titanium, mining Bitcoin, borrowing against your Bitcoin responsibly. And there's a lot of scam products in the lending space. I probably am losing a lot of money by not having a trading course, but I'm not going to talk about anything I don't believe in here on the channel. Which is why I'll tell anyone, if you've got any money left on an exchange, or if you're still thinking about leverage trading this bull run, or if you've got altcoins, reconsider all three of those positions. Keep it simple. Buy more Bitcoin. And with all that said, I've been rambling for 43 minutes. I'm going to end this one here. If you did enjoy this one, consider subscribing if you want to be notified when this big mug goes live again. And with all that said, I might go live for you guys tomorrow. Probably will, considering how interesting the markets are right now. And with all that said, I wish you a happy Saturday night. 8 o'clock where I am. Have a relaxed Saturday. Don't go too wild, and I'll see you tomorrow.